Hi, my name is Bob Phillips and I'm the production designer for Sesame Street here in New York. Usually when we're beginning, we start with the script, read the script and talk with the director. Talking with the director is the most important thing. Then, depending on whether you're going into a fixed situation or a new one, you need to measure and lay out the studio in scale, see where everything's going to fit. You decide what scenery is needed to be built or rented or however we're going to arrange for it. And working all of that out in scale on a piece of paper, like you can sort of see here. Here's part of the arbor for Sesame Street here in New York. That tells you how much room you have to work with. From there, you need to also work with your lighting designer as to how he's going to get in and out with his angles to light what you're doing, and where the camera's going to fit, where are the sound people going to operate from. Knowing where your support systems come from in the walls of the studio is really important. Where do the cameras plug in? Where is the loading door so that you build the set and contrive the scenery so that it works best for everybody? There's an awful lot of parameters involved, and generally you'll do at least 2 revisions so that everybody has their input and makes suggestions along the way. The people I worked with most directly is there's myself, there is a set decorator who takes care of getting all of the decor items and the props and furniture and soft goods. There is the technical director or master carpenter, depending on what he's called, and he works with the carpentry crew who either builds or sets up the scenery, walls, and heavy physical parts. Sometimes there's a shop that you have the scenery built at, and then it's trucked in, so you also work with the head carpenter or technical director at the shop who supervises that end of the construction. Then there's your scenic artist who does all the painting on the scenery, who may or may not have other helpers, and sometimes that's done at the shop and sometimes we do it here. We have a scenic artist here who works with us all the time. There's also the prop crew who is here, who helps set up the set decoration on the set once it's there, or helps set up the trees and bushes if we're doing an exterior, helps to get the final vision fine-tuned so it looks right for camera. Those are the people that I work directly with. The toughest thing with puppets is to make sure that you have room for the operators that is unseen off camera. So over the long haul, it's much easier if the set is raised in the air so that the puppeteers can work standing with their hands up over their head. So scenery stops here and is decorated from here up. And what is below that is just framing to stand it up so that you can run cables and wires through it for camera or for lighting or for sound. You need to allow room for monitors on stands that they can see, that generally play about here, so that if I'm a puppeteer like this and I'm looking down, I can see the monitor so I know what I'm doing. And you need room for that equipment and that they can still walk around. A lot of the time, puppeteers will be working with human characters, so we often platform the human characters up so that the puppet is the same height it would be if everyone were on the floor. That generally comes out to be about 1 meter or 3 feet is that height for a human character with puppets. When you're working with the puppets on the ground, we have several small dollies and rolling devices that we sit them on so that their butts are almost on the floor level, and so that they can move by pushing their feet around a little bit like this. And that seems to work very well, but their movement is more limited that way, and they can't go quite as far. There's a lot of different ways that we solve that. One is, for example, Fran Brill, who plays Zoe, is very much shorter than everybody else. And she has a special pair of shoes that costumes built that are like Greek Cathernae. There's a heel this deep on it that she walks around in, so she's higher. Sometimes we put apple boxes, which are solid wooden boxes of a standard size that we use a great deal to raise and lower things in the studio. And we will strap those together for the area that the shorter puppeteer has to work in. And then sometimes we have some small platforms that we put in if there's really a height discrepancy that we can pre-plan. So it's kind of like when they used to put Paul Newman on a platform next to a tall leading lady, so that you would cut the shot at waist and you wouldn't be able to tell that he was really short. Oh my goodness, that was enormous. That was a very big change. We had gotten away with murder for years and years when it was regular television, because the backgrounds would always be fuzzy compared to the foregrounds. And as long as you didn't go in really tight for a close-up, you didn't have to worry too much. So scenery was a lot less expensive before high def. Now with high def, you can see like a fly on a wall 12 feet behind the character's head. So when we reinstalled the set in our current studio, we had to go in and put new mortar in all of the brick. We had to clean up all the edges. There was all sorts of stuff we had to do. And we had to make sure that it was good for close-up everywhere on the set. That's a very good question. When you design for the theater, which I do a great deal of, you're designing for each person's singular point of view. So you can plan how far and how much scenery you have to complete by figuring out your sight lines. When you're working with multi-cameras, particularly with the jib, you have to cover a lot more territory so that you are not limiting all of the shots that they can take. So you generally end up doing better than 180 degrees with what you're covering. Sometimes you go as far as 270 degrees, depending on what the shots are. It used to be in television that 180 was the limit, because you didn't want to cross and shoot at yourself in a 3-camera setup. Now we do a lot of single camera things, and we do reverse shots, so there's a lot more consideration that has to happen for that. The set down in our studio now is not quite 360. It's probably about 300 degrees, maybe 320, when all the parts of them are done, are in the roll drop over the loading door and all. We have discussed actually completing the street in a complete circle, and some other Sesame Street productions around the world have done that from the beginning. We just haven't backed up to do that, and it's not a bad idea to start with it that way. Sightline is what a person sitting in a seat at a theater will see. It's also what your camera is seeing. Once the scenery ends and goes into backstage, that's the limit of your sightline. That's what sightline is. Well, I guess the main thing is you really need to talk to the director and get very clear about what the goal is about the shoot you're doing, so that you are not assuming you know what the director wants, because you could be very surprised. It's also helpful if you work with the puppeteers beforehand, so that you can help them out and find out really the movement that they're thinking about doing, so that you don't hamper that in the actual construction of the scenery. Your job is to make it easier, not just to make it nice to look at. I mean, I'm a little bit old school here, so I tend to draw everything with pencil and by hand first. So you see here is a floor plan for a studio that is laid out with an exterior, and here's the trees and bushes. Here's a little set that is an interior. This is Elmo's bedroom, as a matter of fact. So here's where the walls are. And this shows you where the cyclorama that goes around the studio's limit is. And, for example, here's doors. So this is part of what I was talking about earlier. I have other versions of this plan that show you where all the lighting grids are, so that we make sure that we site the set so it's under the right lights, that I check with the lighting designer. To do this, I use regular drafting tools and regular drafting paper. So it's triangles and scale rules and pencils. I find it's quicker. I use the Xerox machine a great deal because I'm happy to copy stuff and cut it up and paste it like other normal people would use a computer. But I'm just, my old boss said, why would you learn to do computer drafting when you are faster on paper than anybody I know on computer? And it's all about time too, because you want to be able to keep up with changes and make things go quicker. There are, however, lots of terrific computer drafting programs. In terms of color stuff, I do use Photoshop a lot. And for specifying color with my scenic shop, again, I just go through a paint book and I tell them it's this color, and then I want you to use a little of this color to tone it or whatever. Sometimes I do color pencil or watercolor sketches and send it. Sometimes I lay these things out in Photoshop and do the textures and the changes that Photoshop will allow me to do, and then I can send that electronically to them. This past season, the first time, I can show you over here, we got this silly little thing, and this has been a godsend because it not only will give me a copy, I can in fact copy this quick drawing in here, send it immediately to the shop without having to use a fax machine anymore, which we relied on for 20 years. That technology is going away. So this has been terrific. This has really speeded up a lot of the process. Something else that I do every week for Sesame Street, which is going to be really helpful for other people to know about, is we put out, this is a schedule of everything we're going to do on each day so that the crew knows what it is that we're going to do, and then we have marked what we're going to set up at night or change, and then it has a floor plan for every single shot we're going to do. So it shows you where things are going to be and how we're going to make it work. And then the director gets a set of these also, and the director can mark it up, putting their camera positions in, and they know before they come in the studio if it's not going to work. And then they call me up and say, you know, can we move this over a little here? Can we do a little more over there? Or I don't need all of this. I only need this much. So this goes out usually the week before. And this has turned out to be one of the handiest things we've got. This really makes it easy for everybody.